The pain of the past always seems great until we drink its alluring remedy, permitting our present power to be swallowed in our shallow breath. It's like a painful inhale followed by a sigh of relief. Yet we at this point are the cause of our own pain. And one may think, well, pain has causes and we must be subject to them. And what causes pain but forgetting you're the subject through them? Unraveling ourselves in effort to uncover what was, but if what was still is, then all we've done is set ourselves back. I think we set ourselves back a lot of times in our understanding when we don't really allow ourselves to be in the moment. And when I say don't really allow ourselves to be in the moment, I mean constantly referencing what currently is to what was. And I think we have to do the same set of things in order to promote the same set of feelings that we might have in the past, or I don't know, some fictitious idea that happiness is really found in external things. The thing I've been thinking about most is our relationship to ourselves and how that really contributes to our overall growth and development as people. I think what it means to give yourself a chance is to give yourself a choice. I think a lot of us don't really make the choice when it comes to who we are, what we want to bring into our lives, and I think that's what sort of sets us back. Not because I guess we're supposed to, but because that's really all we can do with our thought. I think that a lot of times thinking isn't the objective, not because thinking isn't beneficial. I think that thoughts can be very beneficial. I think some of the greatest inventions, things, et cetera, are all products of the way we think and aligning ourselves to certain thoughts. But I think that alignment has to take place before the thoughts are really had. I think a lot of us try to think ourselves out of our issues and think ourselves out of the same place that we're in without recognizing that we're the one that's perpetuating the place. And when I say perpetuating the place, I mean, I think it really just is about how you feel. How you feel in any given moment that truly leads to the next moment's abundance and relative sense of peace. I don't think that beauty is really captured in all of our material gains, all of any of that. I don't think that really is the objective. And I don't think thought is the objective either. I think we can think ourselves into our own despair a lot of times. And that's why I think it's not the objective. I think it's to find out how you can use the thoughts to truly benefit you and truly allow you to be who you are and sort of learn to love who you are through that. And I think if we don't recognize, or if we don't input our own thoughts, then they're really going to be inputted for us, inputted by our previous versions of ourselves and the things that we want to escape from. And I don't think the problem is having thoughts, but thinking that we are the thought itself. I think a lot of times we are being pulled by our thoughts and we think that we're doing the pulling ourselves. I think it's not necessarily about truly separation from your thoughts or separating yourself from your whole ego, your whole identity, et cetera, et cetera. I think that the ego is a necessary something. And I don't mean that to say that the negative aspects need to be present at all times, but we have to have something to express something. You can't be nothing and you would express nothing. I think it's important to acknowledge that you already are somebody. And a lot of the limitations that we have in place are really just limitations that we have placed. And I think sometimes those placements aren't necessarily with our conscious control or conscious effort, but I think that we, in a subtle way, whether subconscious or not, we have agreed to certain things that limit us. We agree to certain mentalities about ourselves, whether that be caused by our upbringing, some type of event, some type of this, some type of that. And I don't know. I kind of wanted to just sit here and talk about it because I think right now in my life, in my experience, it's really just about moving into new chapters, moving into new eras, moving into new headspaces. And I think we can't really move forward if we don't acknowledge the things that are holding us back. And sometimes the things that are holding us back, we may think really aren't. We may think, oh, this is just something I do. But we can also recognize that that doing of something is making us feel a certain way that's representative of the past. And, to a good extent, I think that it's easier to sort of posit yourself through new action and alleviate your perspective through actually doing new things and becoming a new person with the experience rather than doing the same things over and over again that sort of jeopardize it and just trying to change your perspective of it in a way. And I don't mean that to say you can, because I think a lot of our associations and relationships with certain things are things we establish. Like a thing that takes away from you negatively doesn't necessarily have to. It's a subtle choice that we make as well, but some choices I think are easier than others. And I think it's about understanding yourself enough to recognize what things you need to change in terms of your action to actually align your thoughts with that thing. I think if we're doing something in terms of our action and we want to think something the opposite, it doesn't always work. Like it's like trying to think of how can I be more patient while acting through impatience, while constantly not allowing yourself to be patient, not perpetuating an action that's representative of the thought or reality you wish to create. And I think we're constantly shifting realities in a way. We're constantly shifting our ideas, our personas, our understanding of ourselves and how that relates to the world around us. And I think it's when we aren't present or aren't really paying attention that we're sort of forced to conform to the way we were in the past, forced to familiar attitudes, familiar actions. And I don't mean that to say that familiar is bad. I think sometimes the familiar is beautiful. I think it's comforting to know things that know you. It's comforting to know yourself in a certain situation and know how you can interact and sort of let yourself go on autopilot in a way. But I don't think that's where change is really bred. I think our change is bred in our ability to instantiate new. And by instantiate new, I really just mean be who you are, where you are. I think a lot of us can recognize our own internal change, but somehow when we get into certain situations that are representative of the past or certain environments that sort of bring us back to those old mentalities, we find that we can't really do that. And I think it's because of the way our egos and mind has associated with that thing. And I think until we learn how to associate with ourselves, then we're always going to be guided by circumstances and events rather than who we are. I think it's important to sort of understand what presence is. And to me, the definition of presence is really just being without thought or being able to see your thoughts or being able to observe what is currently going on, being able to observe what is without painting it with the color of who you are unintentionally. And I say unintentionally because I think we can have a certain intention with how we paint things. And I think in that way, we can allow ourselves to see more beauty because the beauty is one with us. There's no beautiful experience that you are not a part of. There's no experience that you are not a part of because you, in a lot of senses, are the experience. Everything on the outside is really just how it is. You can see, like I'm looking outside right now and it's beautiful. But it is always going to be beautiful as long as I look at it in a beautiful way. And I don't mean that to say that you can look at any situation and call it beautiful. I don't mean that at all. But I do think that in a lot of our lives, there are many things that we fail to appreciate, we fail to be grateful for because we've conformed with such an identity and such a mentality that's familiar. Because we've told ourselves over and over again that that's not something we actively appreciate, or we're not present enough to actually make the choice towards the appreciation. And I think it all is a habitual thing too. I think we get addicted to who we are. I think we get addicted to the way that things have been and the comfort with knowing our pain, the comfort with knowing what hurts us, the comfort with, avoiding our pain rather than actually going out to get something new in a way. And I don't mean that to say our whole life is sort of catered to our getting, to our gain, because I think, if we're only trying to gain, we won't really recognize what we currently have. And I think the recognition of what we currently have is one of the most important things we can do for ourselves. Because I think once you recognize what you have, then you don't really need to get something else in order to make you happy. You may want something else. You may want to fulfill your dreams, your goals, and move forward with that. But I truly believe that you have to give yourself the value first. And not even just for the gain of that certain something, but so you can actually be the one who's there to get it. So you're not degrading yourself and waiting on yourself to be complete on some type of acquisition. You're already complete the way you are. And I think giving ourselves that certain strength and validity is what allows us to be authentic and confident with whatever we do. Because it won't be about the outcome. It won't be about anything but you taking the steps to walk your path and learning how to establish happiness while you're there. I think some of my greatest times in life have always been when I've derived happiness from the realization that I can be happy because of anything. I can go outside right now and take steps and walk and be like, oh, I'm happy I get to walk and truly experience that and truly experience that happiness. And I think what stops us from feeling that sometimes is our own ego. The thing telling us, why would you be happy about that? Anybody can do that. Anybody could do this. It's the comparison in the relation and the constant thought about it, I think, that takes us away. Happiness is not a thought, it's a feeling. A lot of things are more so felt, and what we're trying to do in terms of our acquisitions and goals and anything like that isn't to get a thought. It isn't to find an answer in our head, it's to find an answer through our feeling. It's to feel content where we are and to be where we are and be happy about the space that we're currently occupying. And I'm recognizing that you don't need to do a bunch of stuff to be happy with the space you occupy. Things don't have to look a certain way for you to be a certain way. And I think it's when we are a certain way that we actually begin to change the way things look around us. It's when we perpetuate happiness that we actually see it in the world around us. It's when we are grounded in our own peace that we actually find peace in our lives. That we actually start to get rid of the things that don't really contribute to our peace. I think all change happens with shifts in perspectives. A shift in who you are, a shift with how you're going to traverse the world, a shift with the choices you make. And I think our choices become so habitual in a way that we forget that we're the ones making them. We forget that we have a say in the life that we're living. We forget that we can actually go out here and do what we want in a way. And there's no limit to that other than us. And of course, there's circumstances, there's events, there's things that may block you as obstacles, quote unquote, or things that we may call obstacles, but really they are just things as they are. Some paths are harder than others. But the whole idea of hard and easy and troublesome and a problem oftentimes is just a projection of our own relationship to that certain something. Because we want it to be easy. And the reason we want it to be easy is because we want to be able to value ourselves easily. We want to be able to say to ourselves, oh, I have value, oh, I can do this. We want to feel sure about who we are and content in our place without ever actually giving contentment to the place we're at. We're moving forward into this unknown and we want it to look a certain way so we can be a certain way. We want to find comfort in some type of imaginary future, rather than actually trying to establish comfort where we are. And I think comfort where we are is what breeds comfort in the future, because the future starts today. The future starts right now. It's constantly being etched into. So if we find comfort where we are now, then we have comfort in the future. And that doesn't always mean it's going to remain in this way and that way, because I'm not really talking about environmentally. I'm talking about our internal environments, the way we treat ourselves internally. And if we learn to ground ourselves in our own happiness and our own contentment and our own self-love, then a lot of our issues, I feel, would cease. Not because there are no longer issues, but because we no longer see them as issues. Because we are no longer investing so much of our value in ourselves and that certain things that we have the goal to call it an issue. Instead, it's just something we may have to do. It's something that we have to do. And I think sometimes when we do things that don't align with what we want to do in a way, like if you have your day set in a specific schedule, like I want to do this, that, and the other, this, and then something comes up and you have to change that. A lot of us demean our entire day because of it. And I don't really understand why. If the point isn't to experience the day, the point is to experience yourself. We have an opportunity to have a day to experience ourselves. And I think that's truly the objective. To be where you are, regardless of how things shift. It's about having enough presence to make the choice to give yourself validation where you are, to not allow your ego and your identification with who you are to take you away from where you are. And I don't know. I think that's what I've been thinking about the most recently. Like, I think that's been the most repetitive thing on my mind is, learning how to not take away from yourself and learning not how to take away all your value in reference to things that aren't really you. I think we place so much of who we are in what we see and especially in our thoughts. And you can say thoughts are real things or thoughts are this, because thoughts do lead to action. Thoughts do lead to what you attract, because thoughts create your feeling in a way. And if we can recognize we can choose our own thoughts to a degree, then it doesn't really matter where you are. It just matters how you look at where you are. how you're looking at yourself, and how you're making sure you're not strictly just taking your value and your place in the world in reference to where you are not. It's like we're trying to find comfort in a place we're no longer occupying, trying to find comfort in a place that we aren't even at. So, I don't know. If you made it this far in the video, thank you very much. I really do appreciate this. I appreciate you guys listening to this rant if you made it this far. And if you didn't, I appreciate you anyway. I really think it's not even about, just living in reference to how other people interact too. I think it's about giving whatever you have the value you feel it deserves, and just leaving it at that, and not really allowing it to be up to interpretation. And I think the same thing works with ourselves. And I don't mean that to say we can't be open, because I think recently I'm thinking you have to be open with your perspective. You have to be open with your understanding in order to truly cultivate something. And I don't mean that to say that we have to constantly be malleable and allow other people to tell us this, is that, and the other to change our mind. But we at least have to have a mind that is open to new things. Because if it's open to new things, we can have better. We can open ourselves up to new ways of thinking that actually accommodate us in a better way. So thank you.